What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Modern video, and today we're going to be taking a look at a deck that really, when the Violent Outburst banning happened and we saw this nerf to Cascade, I really thought that this and Yawgmoth were going to be one of the best decks to actually be playing in the current format. And while I don't think I'm necessarily wrong, there's definitely been some surprising additions to the Modern format that have kind of put Amulet Titan, considerably kind of keeping in that same spot. So today we're going to take a look at Amulet Titan. We're going to go over why it's a powerful deck, some of the assumptions that we made that would make it probably one of the best decks in the Modern format, but just that top spot just seems to be just out of reach for this deck. So, of course, before we get too deep into the video, if you like the content and you want to see more, I post a lot of Modern and Pioneer-based content, along with some other longer-form videos. So if any of that stuff interests you, please consider subscribing to the channel and ring the notification bell so you know when those videos get posted. And if you want to consider supporting me even further than that, I do have channel memberships. So if you want to monetarily support me and everything, all the money is going to plan on going into the channel, trying to improve kind of like our setup and everything, and what we do, and try to expand on some of the content as well as expanding on some of those rewards and things like that for being a member. So, if that's something you'd like to do, you can go ahead and do that as well. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about Amulet Titan. For those that might not be in the know about what Amulet Titan does, it uses and abuses the ability of Primeval Titan, more specifically like the ETB and attack trigger. So Primeval Titan is a 6-mana, 6/6 trample. And while I know you're thinking about it, like Modern is this format that is very efficient, how is a 6-mana creature, that doesn't have any built-in protection or anything, and only gets lands, how is that good for Modern? Well, I'll tell you here in a second. Because Primeval Titan says that when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you search your library for 2 land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So this works pretty well with the card Amulet of Vigor that says whenever a permanent enters the battlefield tapped under your control, untap it. And if you have multiple Amulet of Vigors in play, you get multiple untaps. So when you play one of these sweet lands, which we call them Karoo lands, bounce lands, whatever you want to call them, we'll look at Golgari Rot Farm as an example. It says it enters the battlefield tapped, and then when it enters the battlefield, you return a land you control to its owner's hand, and it adds, in this case for Golgari Rot Farm, green and a black. So with Golgari Rot Farm, Gruul Turf, you have something like Crumbling Vestige, technically enters the battlefield tapped and allows you to add 2 mana. You just can't bounce this by itself to its owner's hand. You have Simic Growth Chamber. You have, that looks like that's it actually. So this deck is actually pretty lean on bounce lands, as I am now coming to realize it. Anyway, so with those lands, you can put them into play, and then if you have 1 Amulet of Vigor, you're going to be able to untap it and add 2 mana, and then return it to your hand. If you have 2 Amulets, you have 4 mana. If you have 3 Amulets, you have 6, so on. You end up getting 2 mana per Amulet that is in play. So in this kind of way, you can play something like an Urza Saga on turn 1 to play an Amulet of Vigor. Then on turn 2, you play something like a Michelsen's Garden, use the mana from Urza Saga to turn this into an Amulet. And then you can use Urza Saga to then go and get you an Amulet. So then by now you have 3 Amulets that are in play, and 1 bounce land is going to produce 6 mana, which allows you to cast Primeval Titan. So we got Primeval Titan on the battlefield. We did it on turn 3, which is pretty impressive. Also pretty well set up to do some more crazy things. So how is this deck actually winning the game? So there's this kind of sweet card called Dryad of the Elysian Grove, printed in Theros Beyond Death, that is a 3-mana 2/4 that allows you to play an additional land on each of your turn, and lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. So with something like Dryad of the Elysian Grove, you can then end up playing Primeval Titans, and then end up going and getting something like a Valakut the Molten Pinnacle that enters the battlefield tapped. And then whenever a mountain enters the battlefield under your control, if you control at least 5 other mountains, you may have Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, deal 3 damage to target creature or player. So in decks like these, you want to kind of stack land drops. You want to go and kind of get some of your other lands. When you have multiple Amulets in play and you play a Primeval Titan, you're able to go and get stuff like a Simic Growth Chamber along with something like a Talaria West. So then you can go and transmute it. Transmuting, you pay 1 and double blue. You discard this card, you search your library for a card where converted mana costs 0, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle your library, and you can only transmute as a sorcery. So it's a little bit worse to do this, or to go get Tolaria West and do your thing in the combat step, because you're not able to actually use the mana to go and get it. But with 3 amulets in play specifically, and you have a Simic Growth Chamber, you have 6 mana from Simic Growth Chamber, you'll have 3 mana from the Tolaria West, so you'll be able to use that mana to transmute it, go get something like a Summoner's Pact, allows you to search your library for a green creature, reveal it, put it to your hand, and then you have to pay 2 and 2 green at the beginning of your next upkeep, and if you don't, you lose the game. The rulings now in Magic are a little less harsh. Summoner's Pact, if you just like went to your draw step and you completely bypassed like your upkeep and you had a Summoner's Pact, you would just straight up lose the game. Like you would not get a chance. Like now you're able to put that on the stack if it's forgotten. You know, your opponent's able to put it on the stack, so either they choose no and then you don't lose the game, or they say yes and then you're forced to pay if you're able to pay. That doesn't stop people from creating land bases and board states where they're unable to pay Summoner's Pact if it goes on the stack, but you know, it is what it is. But this lets you search for a green creature. You can go get something like a Primeval Titan. Like we pointed out, you have 6 mana left over. If you have any additional mana left over, like if you're able to make some extra land drops or make some extra mana, you're able to go get something like a Cultivator Colossus, which is like a new, I'm going to say new addition to the deck. It's probably one of the newest additions outside of like the One Ring, which we'll get to here in a second. And it's a 7 mana star with trample. It has power toughness equal to the number of lands you control. And when it enters the battlefield, you put a land from your hand on the battlefield. If you do, draw a card, repeat this process. So while it doesn't go infinite, there were some versions of this deck that played like one of the creatures from, I believe it was Strixhaven, where if you had like 2 amulets in play and a bounce land, you were able to, you know, play a land, make 4 mana, you know, return the land to your hand, activate the creature, draw a card, put a land into play, and do it over and over until you had more amulets in play, and then you were able to net mana, and you were able to play your thing, whatever. Cultivator Colossus is a lot more straightforward, because if you just have a handful of lands, then you're able to just kind of like play them out. You're going to end up drawing cards, and eventually all those lands are going to become spells, because that's the only way that you can really stop this. You're going to have a ton of triggers in play, and while on Magic Online, players are going to be click through it, whatever. In paper, you know, if you put like 5, 6, 7 lands into play, and you have a way to kind of like give some of your things haste and whatever, you know, like you have with like Hanweir Battlements and something like Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle coming into play. Again, with like multiple amulets stacked up on top of it too. You're going to be able to give your Primeval Titan and your Cultivator Colossus haste. You're going to be able to attack in. You're going to get more Primeval Titan triggers. Chances are you're going to be able to kill your opponent as well with like Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle. At some point, you know, you put all these lands into play, and then you have like Valakut with a Dryad in play, and you can just like one-shot your opponent from there. And if they somehow survive that, they're probably not surviving the attack from the Cultivator Colossus plus the Primeval Titan or multiple Titans, depending on the draw. So that's kind of where the power of this deck lies, is trying to get Primeval Titan to the battlefield as soon as possible, and then generate a ton of value and figure out a few decision trees from there. Most of the time, it is correct to either get another Primeval Titan with your Tolaria West transmute to go get Summoner's Pact. Sometimes it's right to go and get Cultivator Colossus. Other times, you're just looking for Dryad Elysian Grove or maybe an Arboreal Grazer, if you already kind of have your board set up, to be able to kind of burn your opponent out with a Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, while having to use the attack step. The rest of the deck, I mean, we have you have 4 Amulet. You have an Expedition map, which can go and get one of your bounce lands or one of your other lands, you know, in a pinch to kind of get your combo going. We have the One Ring, 4 copies of it. This is going to allow you to, you know, live for an extra turn if you need it, and it's going to end up drawing 3 cards, which sometimes really all this deck needs is just one good spell. It's looking for one of its 4 Primeval Titan, 4 Summoner's Pact, even a Tolaria West. There's essentially 9 ways to go and get a Titan with this deck, or, you know, 9 Titans, quote unquote, in the deck, and there's like 6 Cultivator Colossuses, you know, the One Ring giving you the protection. And if you can just get this going, where if you can just play this on like turn 2 or turn 3, you know, this is going to kind of pad your life total quite a bit. And again, when you're drawing 2, or, you know, you draw 3 cards and you end up drawing another 3 cards, you know, you've drawn probably like 9 or 10 cards over the course of like a few turns. Chances are, you know, seeing over a sixth of your deck, you're going to be able to find a way to produce a Titan or a Cultivator Colossus, which makes this deck pretty consistent. Even with 31 lands, you know, over half the deck being lands, you are still able to kind of cobble together something to where you can get a Titan into play and start generating some value. Real quickly, I'll go over some, kind of like a typical line, I guess, would be. So if you have like amulets in play, you play a Primeval Titan, and where we said if you had 3 amulets, you can go get like Talaria West. You can end up generating 9 mana, transmute it for 3. You have 6 left. You go get a Summoner's Pact. You go get another Titan, and then you can go and get something like Hanweir Battlements. Or I believe even Mirror Pool works, because you create a token that's a copy of a creature that you control. So if you have like 3 amulets in play and you have something like a Crumbling Vestige, you can actually go and generate a mana and then untap it, and it ends up being like 4. And then you generate mana with the Mirror Pool, and then like on the last activation, you just copy a Titan. So this way, then you have 3 Titans in play. You can go get Hanweir Battlements and Valakut the Molten Pinnacle. You end up putting these into play. You give all 3 Titans haste. You get to attack. You get 6 more Titan triggers. You're attacking for 18 on that turn. On the turn that we kind of like mapped out in the beginning, that's like turn 3 or turn 4. You're attacking for 18, and then you're also putting multiple other lands into play, where you're just going to kind of be set up for next turn. You can get like Boseiju if you think you're going to need it. Maybe if your opponent's playing like Tron, you're going to have to blow up a bridge. You can go and get that. We have other Urza Sagas, so you can kind of go and get some of these other lands, start making construct tokens to kind of go a little bit wider on the board. Otawara, you can get it if you need to bounce something. Oran-Reef the Vastwood, you can also get this too, and it's going to enter the battlefield tapped, and you're able to put multiple counters on your thing, so this could even just help you swing for lethal as well, and this is like a pretty new addition, I'd say, to the deck as well. Not sure what set it's printed in, because that is definitely Commander set symbol. Definitely not Modern Horizons 3, you cannot play the Commander cards from it. But this is actually interesting because, again, that play that we outlined, you're going to end up going for 21, 24, 27 with all the activations from Oran-Reef Vastwood. You can even use Vesuva as well. It's like copy if your opponent somehow gain even more life. So you can go up to 36 damage on turn 3. That's pretty powerful. That's pretty good. The sideboard, you have Bojuka Bog, Colony Garden, and Radiant Fountain as kind of your other utility lands. Bojuka Bog is going to get rid of, some of the other graveyard decks. This is something that we can search up with Expedition Map. Something we can search up with Primeval Titan. And then with the bounce lands, we can just reset it and, keep bogging our opponent until they don't have any other way to keep fueling the graveyard. We have Colony Garden. While usually this would be kind of good against like some of the edict effects, I think Liliana the Veil might have seen like a slight uptick in play, so it can be a little awkward. Arboreal Grazer sort of kind of helps like with Shieldred's Edict and things like that, but Colony Garden with just in general edicts is going to kind of help as well. This can be a way to also protect some of our Urza Saga tokens from a Shieldred's Edict as well. So, pretty neat. Getting to reset this, be able to create more tokens, kind of combos decently well with like Oran-Reef the Vastwood, because you can put counters on these 0/1 plants and make them into 1/2s. And that's not nothing in the grand scheme of things. Radiant Fountain against some more aggressive decks, you can end up gaining 4, 6, 8 life off of something like this just by playing your bounce lands. One, you have your bounce lands in place, so then you can end up just casting your things naturally. Pick Your Poison has been an all-star sideboard card, seeing 2 copies in this deck list here. You have Relic of Progenitus as more graveyard hate, something we can get with Urza Saga. Defense Grid for the control decks, and decks are trying to interact with what you have going on, making it a little bit harder by making their spells cost 3 more to cast if it's not their turn. Dismember as like really good removal. Fire Spout as widespread removal for some of the other small creature decks. Spelunking is sort of kind of like a 5th amulet, just not nearly as good, because it just has the land enter the battlefield untapped. It doesn't create a trigger. So if you would play something like a bounce land, it'll just come into play untapped, and then you'll have the bounce trigger. So it'll kind of accomplish the same thing, but multiple copies of Spelunking really won't stack with it. And I believe that it also kind of conflicts with Amulet of Vigor. But, this is like a way that you can, put a land card from your hand into play. Like this will ramp you and kind of get you where you need to go. Roxanne, even newer from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, is a 5-mana 4/3, and when it enters or attacks, you create a colorless artifact token named Meteorite. When it enters the battlefield, does 2 damage to any target, and you it adds 1 mana of any color. Whenever you tap an artifact token for mana, it adds 1 more additional type that artifact token could produce, which is going to help you kind of ramp and play, Colossus or Primeval Titan and whatnot when your opponent is trying to mess with your Primeval Titans and Colossus and things like that. Generous End, I'm not really sure like what this is about. I'm assuming that maybe against like some kind of like Blood Moon decks that you're just using this to kind of search for like forests and things like that, because there's really not other cards that you can get with this. I mean, typically, at least in some lists, you would see like Breeding Pool. So I could definitely kind of see Generous Ent being there if you want like Breeding Pool, if you need like access to Otawara, something like that. You know, I could see that. But Generous Ent probably also just being another big threat. 5/7 that makes a food token. That's a big body. It doesn't die to something like a Unholy Heat. You know, it needs Heat plus like Bolt, so it does take multiple removal spells. So maybe just a decent card to cast. Also probably pretty good just to cycle it and grab like a Force or whatever. There are some Living End decks running around, so like I could also see this just being like a decent card to like kind of throw in, where like you get a 5/7, it does block a lot of other things very nicely, and does end up kind of like whittling down. You do gain a little bit of life, and sometimes this deck only needs that one turn. This deck is very notorious for just kind of being dead on board. Your opponent has like one turn to top deck, and they end up finding Summoner's Pact, Primeval Titan, whatever, and then they're already set up on board, so then they just end up going off. So that is the Amulet Titan deck for the Modern format. Again, this is a deck that I thought was going to be one of the best decks to play in the Modern format, and while it's definitely not a bad choice by any means, it's not what I'm saying, it definitely didn't end up being kind of like the top 2 or top 3 deck that I expected it to be. I still think it's probably a tier 1 deck. I believe it's like 4th or 5th in terms of like metagame share, so it's not like it's doing worse, but it's not really doing any better. You know, we've seen decks like Esper Gorios kind of show up, you know, in the wake of the Violent Outburst banning, and we've seen like that deck kind of have success, and it seems like it's kind of fallen off the wayside. You know, we've seen a lot of the Cyano Draco plus Leyline stuff going on, and you know, that's kind of like mellowed out, it seems like, for the most part. Then you have people playing the Indomitable Creativity deck again, one of the best decks from probably about a year or two ago, now actually seeing significantly more play. The Modern format is just ever shifting, and of course with Modern Horizons 3 on the horizons, no pun intended, that, you know, we could see a huge shakeup to the format. We see a lot of cool cards being spoiled, a lot of decks that are seemingly popping up like Affinity that are going to seemingly get some sweet upgrades to their deck. So it'll be interesting to see what Modern looks like even a month from now. But for now, Amulet Titan, if you're going to kind of get into the Modern format, I think this is just a safe deck to play. It's a deck that always ends up being good no matter what the format looks like, how fast or how slow it is. Amulet Titan always just seems to be a solid deck choice. So that's my feelings. That's going to do it for me in this video. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like on the video. Comment down below what Modern deck you would like to see next. Of course, if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more Modern, Pioneer, and longer form videos, please consider subscribing to the channel and ring the notification bell. Check out the Casual Spikes podcast that goes up on most Saturdays, where me and my co-host Randy from Modern with Randy talk about the Modern and Pioneer formats, talk about Pro Tours and other things like that to get you ready for your RCQ season. So that's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next one.